Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Gopijan Vallabha Girivaradari Gopijan Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanacha Jaya Radha Madhava Kanja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janana, Janarajana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Jamunatira Vanachari, Jaya Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Shila Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada Patita Pavana Ki Jaya, Hare Krishna. So very good morning to all of you who are listening wherever you are, in which department you are. It's an interesting class. It's like a live class. Um, just a second. Let's get here. Yes. It is a pleasure to be here in Gitanagri. Um, Gitanagri is a place where our founder Charya sit to teach all his institution how to live off the land. They want me to move. All right. That's okay. Some light problems. So how do I need to, where do I need to go? Or maybe just the thing is the sun, right? If I just change a little bit, is that uh, is that okay? Just some adjustment with the technology. Um, can you see me there on your phone? That's it. Puru says, okay, he can see me. It's all right. I think it's working. Yes. So it is a pleasure to be here in such a special location where Srila Prabhupada chose to teach his mission, how to live off the land. And indeed, I'm very happy to be here among all of you. And yesterday we had a very incredible festival celebrating the appearance of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we're going to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I understand we are in the fifth canto. We are reading chapter number 7, and I guess the verse is the verse 9. That's what I was given. 8, 9. Yes, here we go. Um, well, it just says, Yatra ha vava bhagavam hari Yapi tatrayanam nija yanam vatsalyena sannidha yata itcha rupena. The translation go. At Pulaha Ashram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, out of his transcendental affection for his devotee, becomes visible to his devotees, satisfying his devotees' desires. So there's a purport to that which says, the Lord always exists in different transcendental forms, as stated in Brahma Samhita. Ramadi Murtishu Kala Nyayamena Navataram Akarod Vanishu Kintu Krishna Swayam Sabhavat Paramapamam Yo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. The Lord is situated as Himself, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is accompanied by his expansions like Lord Rama, Baladev, Sankarsana, Narayana, Mahavishnu, and so forth. The devotees worship all these forms according to their liking, and the Lord, out of his affection, presents himself as Archa Vigraha. He sometimes presents himself personally before the devotees out of reciprocation or affection. A devotee is always fully surrendered to the loving service of the Lord, and the Lord is visible to the devotees according to the devotees' desires. He may be present in the form of Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, Lord Nishingadev, and so on. Such is the exchange of love between the Lord and his devotees. At Pulaha Ashram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, out of his transcendental affection for his devotees, becomes visible to his devotees, satisfying his devotees' desires. Hare Krishna. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanan Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitanina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. So we're reading from a very important part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The fifth canto is a canto which describes many of the fundamental workings of the material nature. And right here, we're being described about the activities of King Bharata. Now, King Bharata, as we learned from the previous chapters and verses, he was a very dutiful king, and he was ruling according to many of the prescribed duties for a king. And he was ruling for a very long time. So the previous verse is stating how prosperous and happy everyone was. As a matter of fact, until his management, there was another name for the place where he ruled. And now, with his management, it becomes called Bharata Varsha. And he ruled for a very long time. Yes. And Maharaj Bharata, just like other kings like Maharaj Ambarisha, which is another great Rajarsi and one of the heroes, king of the Srimad Bhagavatam. They teach by example, and they teach by following a very clear path of duties. And these duties not only guide the society which they're running at the moment, but they guide societies in the future, as it is the case right now. We are reading about his activities, and his activities set a precedent how you would have um, success in your ruling. And one of the main characteristics is that Bharata Maharaj did his duty as a service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the previous verses, it says, following the instruction of Bharata Maharaj, we should act not for our personal satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada kind of reinforces that with the Bhagavad Gita 17:18, saying, Ashadya hutam datam tapas taptam kritam chayat asariti uchate bharta rachatha vidya no iha. Sacrifice, austerities, and charities performed without faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead are non permanent. Regardless of whatever rituals are performed, they're called asat, non permanent. They are therefore useless both in this life as in the next. Kings like Maharaj Ambarish and many other Rajarsis, who were pure devotees of the Lord, simply passed their time in the service of the Supreme Lord. Now, here it's very interesting that Prabhupada is writing that the Rajasis were devotees because that is exactly what's described in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. When the characteristics of a ruler is being described, his first characteristic is he's a devotee of the Lord. And the reason behind it is because being a devotee of the Lord, he would understand the most important need for all humans, which is self realization. And here, all the other realizations which we may achieve, like money and fame and properties and enjoyments, are very non permanent. So they had an understanding of how to enjoy serving Krishna. And Bharata Maharaj is described as someone who enjoyed for a very long time all his property. But the secret is he enjoyed in Krishna consciousness. And now we are coming to the point where he, after having ruled and being the ruler of such a great empire, practically the whole world, he is ready to resign and pass it on everything that he has acquired. So that means he was detached. And to reach that platform of detachment, one has to have a practice. One has to practice during his life. And if that practice is mature at the point of his retirement, he's ready for the next big step in his life, which is full focus on self realization. And that's exactly what Bharata Maharaj is actually anticipating. He is anticipating this situation where now, being the ruler of the whole universe, he's getting ready to renounce. And we can see in our services, we do some service for a few months, a few years, and we are so attached. My name should come for the class. My name should come for the Guru Puja, isn't it? And sometimes it's hard to let go of your service. So it's interesting how Bharata Maharaj, being the ruler of the whole planet, was ready to renounce everything and basically dedicate himself to self realization. And now he came to this beautiful river in this verse. Hare Krishna Prabhu, welcome. Uh, what is your name, Prabhu? Thakur Murali. Thakur Murali Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Welcome. Most of the people are online. So, yes, you're familiar with this. So we're just discussing, Prabhu, that Bharata Maharaj, he was a Rajarsi, and basically one of his most important qualities was that he was a devotee of the Lord, and he knew how to enjoy with the Lord. Therefore, he was happy. Okay, so that's basically what we have covered so far. And we're just about to comment on the fact that he came to this beautiful river, and this river is described as Hula Ashram on the margins of this river. And there, it's relevant. Why did Maharaj go to an ashram? He's the king of the universe. He's the emperor. Why did he go to? Because the emphasis the Bhagavatam is putting on the importance of hearing. Because the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam daily is the remedy for the attachment to the material energy of the Lord without the Lord. Our desire to enjoy this material world is very old, since time immemorial. So, to counteract that desire to enjoy the world without the Lord, Srimad Bhagavatam is the perfect remedy. In fact, when Prabhupada was considering how he would come to America and teach the science of bhakti, this was his most important activity. He was in Vrindavan, and then he was meditating, he was studying, and he was traveling to Delhi, selling his Back to Godhead magazines with the purpose of attracting pious people to help him to publish the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in those trips where our founder Acharya was personally carrying paper, was buying paper, was carrying on rickshaws in a very hot Delhi sun of maybe 102 Fahrenheit, 105 Fahrenheit, 108 Fahrenheit. It's something we might just not even consider thinking about, but he was right there, and he was transporting these materials to print what he considered to be the most important weapon, which was the hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Bharata Maharaj, he is going to an ashram because he understands that listening is what will not only purify, but give him a taste for spiritual life. So the hearing is exactly what brings the taste. It's so much so that when our founder Acharya met his guru, he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Vrindavan, there was a pastime where he was discoursing about the Srimad Bhagavatam, and many of his disciples went into Vrindavan to see Vrindavan. And when they arrived, the class was almost over, and they were a little apologetic to their guru that they hadn't watched the class. And he stops the class, in fact, and he says, "Where have you been?" And they said, "Oh, we were taking darshan of the deities of Vrindavan, Radha Govinda and Radha Raman." And he says, "You think you see the Lord with your eyes? You're mistaken. You see the Lord with your ears." And that was something he really commented as a virtue of Srila Prabhupada, and that was that he was a good listener. Srila Prabhupada was always sitting in the Srimad Bhagavatam class, listening very attentively. And that was one of the qualities that His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, pointed out in our founder Acharya. So the fact that uh, Bharata Maharaj is coming to an ashram is extremely significant because this is the trademark of all the acharyas in this book. All the acharyas went to ashrams, like Narada Muni. He served in an ashram, and there he picked up bhakti again after his long detour. He had a little detour of his bhakti process, but he was born, from someone who served in an ashram, And from that service, serving the saints and the munis, he developed a deep taste for Krishna consciousness. And that's what makes him pursue Krishna consciousness and go after the form of the Lord. So Bharata Maharaj is the emperor, and he is passing on all his wealth, all his fame, all his properties, all his influence to his descendants. And that's another important point because in the traditional Vedic system, the passing on of power, fame, facilities constitutes the social tissue uh, of that society. Because a father would pass on his property to the elder son, and the elder son now becomes the head of the family, and then he protects the parents. The king would pass on his empire, kingdom, whatever it is, to his sons, to the next generation, and he would train them while he is still alive. And that would guarantee experience and at the same time enthusiasm because the young people have enthusiasm. In the early 70s, when this farm was bought, there's so much enthusiasm. I was speaking with one of the first residents, Paramananda Prabhu, and he was describing, not only describing, but showing me videos of them going deep in the wood in that shed where there is the bullock uh, engine, and they would be moving the bulls around and cutting logs, and then putting them on a bullock cart and delivering, home delivering the logs. They would come down and just the video is depicting them throwing logs into everybody's garden for the winter. Then they're just going around giving the logs out. And it's interesting because we were there yesterday looking at the forestry, and there is a great potential in this forest here. In fact, New Vrajadam, Hungary, just inaugurated a hall for the oxen. It's a barn, maybe triple the size of this temple room, and the oxen have an engine where the turbine, they go around, four oxen, and it goes into a shaft, and then it just goes into a PTO, which runs many machines wood logging, granaries, and that is something which is up to the state. It was more than €500,000, the whole setup, and European Union just chipped in more than half of it. So why is this important? This is important because um, that energy of the youth, we're talking about the youth, and that brought us to Paramananda Prabhu and his enthusiasm to please Prabhupada by doing what he wanted it. And for here, he said we should live simply and have a strong Krishna consciousness. So that was his very important. Uh, Prabhu, what time does class finish? Oh, 8 o'clock is the standard. The deity greetings. Perfect. I understand. So, so we're doing good. We're doing good. We have covered many of the topics I wanted to cover. So we have a little more time for expansion. So those of you who are listening, uh, if you have any questions, maybe it comes up. I'm not too sure how that happens. Maybe in the chat. Yes, maybe in the chat. Let me pull up the chat. Uh, yes, yes. Uh, yes, here you have the verse, and we have. Okay, so very good. So we're talking about the youth, and we're talking about handing over uh, the society that, or the management of a society, which then has a chance to perpetuate itself. That's a really crucial point because that detachment is what drives a leader to give what has developed to the best degree to the next generation. And the training period is essential for a smooth transition because when devotees were here in the 70s, when this property was bought, there was so much enthusiasm, but not so much seniorship. Our eldest, I mean, if you were 30, you consider a Maha senior person. So all that enthusiasm naturally would be paved with many mistakes because no experience around or minimal experience around. And in fact, when you look back and you said, if we only had a deep forestry knowledge at that time, how much wealth could we be just harvesting from that? Ginseng and walnuts and all these different trees, which you could have here, which are so valuable, uh, that you could either use them as forestry or harvest some of them and with that money invest in the whole property. Uh, Actually, in Prabhupada's time, uh, there were 10 farms acquired. And from the 10, I think 11, from the 10, only one got sold. That was in Canada. So for me, that's a very good success index because if we have 90% survival at least over 50 years of existence, and if you consider the value of this property, for example, it has gone 10, 20 times of the original price. If you go to New Vrindavan is worth a great deal more than it was when it was bought. If you go to Mayapur, that's impossible to calculate. We're talking of an acre in Mayapur costing, I don't know, maybe $1 million. It's like 30,000 for 70 square meters. So just calculate in 2,400 uh, square meters, which is an acre, 2,500 square meters. If you divide that by 70, you see that there's at least 10, 20 times. So if not 1,600,000, good $600,000 per acre. So the value has increased to some degree. So at least if you talk on real estate level, that investment has progressed. And what happened is at that time, if we had the knowledge that we could really be good agroforestry devotees, we would have the millions now to invest back in all these farms. But the youth is part of our learning curve. And now there's so much seniority around, it's a good time. They say, what's the best time to start? 20 years ago. What's the second best? Now. So we're in a very good position. So the youth was trying to satisfy the spiritual master who was trying to teach Dharma. Our founder Charya was trying to teach Dharma because the Bhagavatam teaches Dharma. And the highest Dharma is Sanatana Dharma, which the Bhagavatam is all about. But it's not dismissing our secondary dharmas. Here, a king is being glorified for doing his duty very well. And where does that knowledge come from? That comes from dharma. Now, when we think of dharma, and dharma is an interesting word because it can be so vast, we could be sitting here for a whole week just trying to understand and define dharma. Mm. But Prabhupada would refer to dharma usually as occupational duty, functional duty. He says dharma means occupational duty. And that's when he's referring to our inherent nature, not inherent, but basically our acquired nature in this world. Our body, our body has a certain quality, isn't it, Prabhu? A body has a certain quality. What service do you like to do here? So Prabhu is saying he likes to do gardening, keeping the temple, of course, very beautiful, very nice. How do you like staying in office a whole day? You cannot do that. So for someone in an office who can sit in an office the whole day and feel very comfortable, to do gardening, hard work is so difficult. But for someone who does gardening and active, to sit in an office, it's the deepest torture you can give to him. So Prabhupada would say that your nature is what guides your actions. That's why occupational duty. So one definition of dharma would be occupational duty. And through that, he was actually indicating that as devotees, we need to take care of this nature to be able to serve the Lord for a long time. Because you can do something which is not your nature for a short time. Like you could sit in an office, let's say, for one day, all right, but a whole week, hey, wait a minute, whole month, 1 year? No, definitely not. The same thing, we bring someone from the city to the farm and you start to put them on the hard work on the fields. Well, the first day, maybe the second day, I'm not sure if I want to go back because the nature doesn't fit. So Prabhupada was talking of Dharma as occupational duty, something which is important for occupational duty. And to have that duty in the service of the Lord, that is devotional service. So therefore, Dharma, Prabhupada would many places translated as occupational duty. But Dharma can also mean justice or law. We have the Dharma Shastra, they have the laws or the blueprint of how the universe works. Prabhupada would also refer as intrinsic nature many times. Because Dharma means intrinsic nature, meaning water. What does water do? Water. What does the water do? Yes. Right? It cleans, it quenches thirty, and everything you said has one intrinsic quality. It's wet. The thirst is cursed because when the water wets, that allows for the tissues to absorb in that wetness. And also liquidity. If you put ice and you leave it, it will become water again. So liquidity is the intrinsic nature of water. Like fire, what is the intrinsic nature of fire? Heat and light. So fire is heat and light as the two intrinsic natures. You can't remove them from the fire, right? So that second meaning of dharma is intrinsic nature, right? And then there are other ones, like you could talk about settled duty. And settled duty is leaning towards Prabhupada's translation occupational duty. Like we have a settled duty in this body, we need to do it. And if we fulfill it in accordance to our eternal duty as a jiva, then we attain our full self realization. And the final description of Dharma is two last ones is one is cultivation of virtue. And you see, like every religion, and many people want to translate Dharma as religion, which is not. Prabhupada many times says Dharma is not equal to religion, it's much beyond. Because Dharma is talking about cultivation of virtue. Here is a Mennonite Amish land country. So when you go around, you see so much virtue. They are very attentive, they're very respectful, they fear God, they help each other, they're very cooperative, they understand community. All of these are virtues. They're very hospitable because they understand this is an important element in relation to God. Now, the cultivation of virtue is really connected to another aspect of Dharma, which is when you bring the ideal situation and the real situation closer. Now, this definition is well explored in this book called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. Krishna Kshetra Swami, he's talking about Dharma in this book, and he's bringing the different dimensions of Dharma and showing how it's connected to cow protection. So, in a specific chapter, he just brings in the different aspects of Dharma. And so, bringing something from the real situation where you are with your anarthas, your conditioning, to the ideal, that desire to bring it close together is Dharma. So that's why the king is going to an ashram, because he wants to bring his ideal consciousness closer to his real consciousness, which has been so involved in management and so many things, even though he was a devotee. Okay? So that dimension of Dharma, bringing something from the actual situation to the ideal, that is Dharma. And to do that, you need to cultivate virtues. And you can only do that through your settled duty, which is your occupational duty. Because then finally you reach your ultimate dharma, which is to serve the Lord and have regain your relationship of love with the Lord, of unalloyed love, where there's no more selfishness in terms of this is me without the Lord. So giving up that identity is something all the acharyas do speak about. And here the king Bharata is showing how he did it. And in the verses, it's saying that when he came to this Gandaki River, where the Shalagram Shila, actually Shalagram Shila is what it was prescribed for Brahman, because the Shalagram Shila, and here we have Damodar, and we have Radha Damodar, is very practical for Brahman because he can travel. It's a very simple worship. And here we hear that the king was there um, in this river next to this ashram. We hear from Chaitanya Charitamrita that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling south of India, he stayed in a house, I think it's of Venkatabhata, and his son, or Gopal, was attentively listening to the Lord. And the Lord was giving his mercy to him. And at the end of his stay, Gopal became so attached to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He wanted to go with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, you will not go now. It's not your time, but in time you will go. And in fact, he does go in time, and he becomes Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And at one point, he's with Rupa Goswami, and he's desiring to worship the Lord. So he considers, I should have a shalagram. So he walks from Vrindavan for many days to the Gandaki River, where Jada Bharata Maharaj is, to collect some of these black rocks, this shalagram with different marks. Each mark is representing one form of the Lord. And he starts getting it, and then, and then he goes to Vrindavan walking back. But then when he's in Vrindavan, he thinks, I'm not qualified to have this worship. I should go back and put them in the same place I had them. So he walks back to the Gandaki River again, and he starts to think, I should really give these stones back to the river because I'm not qualified to worship them. And as he's placing the shalagrams in the shalagrams jump back into his pouch. That would be an interesting film for Spielberg to see. All these shalagram shilas jumping back into his pouch. So he understood the Lord wanted to be with him. And so he takes them to Vrindavan and he's worshiping them. But he realizes all the other Goswamis, they can dress the deities, but he cannot. And see, here the verse saying that the Lord, becoming satisfied, he gives satisfaction for all the devotees' desires out of his affection for the devotee. So this is a very good example of affection. Gopal Bhatta Goswami, he's really attached to this form of the Lord. He's thinking he should not worship them. And then the Lord manifests out of reciprocation. And now the biggest event comes when he's desiring again, I should really worship the Lord. But I have nowhere to put this clothes on because he's a shalagram. I cannot dress him. And overnight, under a certain tree, he goes there and he finds a beautiful form of the Lord. In fact, the most beautiful form of the Lord. And he goes quickly and calls Rupa Goswami, who was the head of the Vaishnava Sangha. And he shows it to Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami says, how incredible! This is the most beautiful form of the Lord. I'll call him Radharaman, the enchanter of Radharani. So Radharaman, Didi, takes this beautiful form. It still has the curvy form of the Shilas at the back. If you visit, I was there once, and I was wondering, oh my dear, because someone gave Damodar Shila, and that was the Shila he was worshiping, so the Damodar Shila, which transformed into Radharaman. And I was there worshiping Damodar, and I thought, wow, what an incredible place to be. I just wish there was a souvenir, like a little piece of this tree. And right in front of me, there was one. So I took it as a souvenir. And many years later, I'm coming to this place with brahmacharis and I'm describing this event. And as I speak, a monkey jumps in the tree and a twig falls on our feet. So I said, here you are. This is the mercy of the Damodar Shila, which is Radha Raman. So Krishna, he satisfies the desires of his devotees. And a little detour in this, and it's an important point. We may think Krishna only does this for his devotees, but as a matter of fact, Krishna is doing this to the whole universe. You see, Krishna is everything. So whatever we are desiring and putting our focus in, Krishna is reciprocating and giving. Even if you consider the Ugra Karma civilization, people want machines and efficiency, and Krishna is reciprocating by manifesting technologies, solar technologies, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence technology. But that's a reciprocation. In its pure form, you find it in the forest. The forest is a perfect example of reciprocation. Because when we look at the forest, we can see the forest, but we cannot see the foundation of the forest. That's the roots. And that's something we will explore in the seminar at 10 a.m. How the roots of the forest is where there's a whole community of bacteria and fungi and nematodes, and every single living entity in that environment is cooperating. So the forest can exist at the top. And wherever there is strong, whatever goes above the surface of the soil is very strong. If you walk in the forest, there's a huge layer of leaves on top of it. And that layer is indicating there's a huge community under that soil, which is giving abundance. And by giving abundance, human being, civilization can exist. So we were visiting a close by neighbor, dear to this community. They're from the Amish tradition. And he went into the thought of feeding his herd with grass only. And he developed to a certain level. First time we went there, he was transitioning from grains to grass. And his son, now see, he's another example of transitional leadership. He retired and said, okay, my elder son, so you stay here and you develop it. And his son took such an interest in regenerative agriculture that now he only feeds the cows with grass. And his statement to us was, my milk is so much more and so much better that I can afford to buy hay in the winter. I prefer to have that incredible grass management, pasture management, trampling the grass. So what happens? It tramples the grass and the grass goes down. And it creates a layer on top of the soil which holds humidity, increases biodiversity, along with the cow dung, which the cows are intensively passing with the cow urine. It creates an incredible environment for fertility. So when we saw his pasture is the height of the fence, and you almost don't see the cows inside the pastures. So he's saying the health of the herd has increased so much. The productivity has increased so much. Abundance is coming to his door. And he is sustaining a line of maybe hundreds of years of Amish on that property. So here, abundance is where the Lord reciprocates. If you desire, he will reciprocate. And with the forest, we can see how all the entities have one desire, the desire to create abundance. And the Lord reciprocates because they're, you could say, that's how their blueprint is made. So bacteria will process, if it's a nitrogen fixing bacteria, it will process nitrogen. It will look for legume, associate with it, and produce nitrogen. It doesn't think, oh, maybe it will be fancy to produce potassium. Let me change my nature. The bacteria is fixed because that's what it does. So when everybody is in homeostasis, the forest is abundant, and therefore it will produce abundance over the ground, where humans will then produce a civilization. And a very final point is that talking about Dharma, the cows and Dharma are two very interchangeable words. We hear from the Bhagavatam that the cow and Mother Earth are like one and the same. Sometimes Mother Earth disguises herself as a cow, and the cow represents Mother Earth. So the cow and also the bull represents Dharma personified. So everything we've been discussing about Dharma has an intimate connection with the bull and the cow. And many would say the cow is sacred because of a, like a kind of a sentiment, a Hindu sentiment. But actually, the fact of the matter is, the cow is revered because in the blueprint of the universe, Krishna put 33 demigods, 33 million demigods in her body. So the cow, if you look from the tradition of India, has that adhikar, that function, that blueprint of representing all of the creation, because all the demigods reside, including Mother Lakshmi. So just by the presence of the cow, you bring auspiciousness. And then if you protect the cows, then you have access to her tangible benefits. The milk, which Gitanagari, I heard, is doing something like 40,000 liters a year, which is and supplying so many communities with this important resource of protected milk. I congratulate the inhabitants and the management for that. And also the milk is related to Dharma. In the Shrimad Bhagavatam 1:17.3, it's called the liquid form of Dharma. And if you go beyond, Prabhupada also says, if you protect the cows, you will bring civilization because you nurture the Brahminical culture, which will then produce civilization. So cow protection, agriculture, relationship with the earth in the form of protecting the forest is what will keep our social tissue alive and abundant. The more we understand about what's below the soil, the more we are successful and productive and abundant. And when abundance is present, you're not fearful of giving. Bharata Maharaj had everything. He's giving up everything. How come? He's sure that there's abundance. He's sure that he'll not run into a scarcity, poverty stricken situation. Even if he is, the Lord will manifest so much that he will be self realized. So the culture of abundance is the basis for the culture of giving. To be a giver, you must have. If you don't have, you cannot give. And anybody who is abundant in his system and gives will attract people because everybody wants to be in an abundant place. So much so that so many native people who were born in India wanted to come to America because here was the place to get your wealth together. But even this wealth, what you're looking for in America is looking for, could not understand where abundance is coming from. And you see, as you progress into civilization, that abundance starts to fall short. So many crises of food, the supply chain, soil fertility going down, economical crisis, recession. We see time from time to time. This is a big topic, and this could be another whole seminar. How abundance is what leads to prosperity and civilization, and scarcity leads to selfishness and exploitation. So the big empires of the world, they, by accumulating, they thought this is where real wealth lies. But over time, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the American Empire is very short. If you say it started after the Second World War, it's already in a decline. We might be thinking of the Chinese Empire as the next empire. We don't know how long that will be. So empires which were rooted on abundance, like if you take the Indian empires of Bharata, it's lasted for thousands of years because it's very resilient. I guess I covered most of the points I'd like to cover. Uh, I think there is no questions. I'll ask Prabhuji here if there's any questions or comment.
Oh, it's interesting in the living time how, for example, those kings are devotees, like Bharata alias Pichu Bharata. So they were, especially first, they said that they were kings, but they were devotees. Usually kings are devotees, but in these instances they were devotees. And the example we get from that, and give up everything. Well, it's not easy for anyone to give up everything and say, I'm going to first. And nowadays I was forced to go too, but
That's true.
yeah.
Only 4% in America of the original forest.
And how those birds are protecting, so the animals were kept away so they peacefully practice their resources. So exactly just living and living for ourselves. It seemed to be a sort of part of the Vedic system that, as I said, in some instances, kings were devotees, but ordinary person after a certain time they leave and go to the forest.
Very good point. I'm very happy with your reflection because you see, this ashram that he went to is in the forest
Yes.
by the Gandaki River. So the forest will have sages and would also have biodiversity. There'll be so many type of roots and fruits and everything that he could maintain himself. But if you go to a forest of pine, what can you do there? You can make some firewood, you can chop down a tree, and then kill a deer. But he's not into that. He is a completely self-realized ahimsa person. So he's not killing anybody. So the forest afforded for these kings and for the Vanaprasthas a livelihood.
Yeah.
But the traditional concept of forest is a monocrop forest.
Yeah.
So life is very restricted because only one type of species. But when you go towards the real forest, which has so much abundance in it, you can create a civilization. For example, if we go to Brazil and the Amazon forest, all those tribes, the Yanomamis, we tend to think of them as primitive, but they're very advanced. They could live with, there is a specific place with the top soil is as deep as this room, the top black soil. And that's what makes so many people fired up about biochar, because they're doing that, and the whole carbonization without oxygen would retain the organic matter in the soil. We talk about, I don't know, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches. We're talking here how many feet?
I said 20 feet taller
20 feet.
yeah.
20 feet of deep black soil. How's that? for uncivilized people. Not bad. Huh? Not only that, we can also explore that in another seminar. By Google Photos, they see that the vegetation was deliberately planted. There's circles around tribes near the river. So all that knowledge was really exciting. Hitananda Maharaj, Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna. Okay, so and here the Lordship's going to appear. Bhagavatam ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bo. It was my first class. So I only had the acharyas and then one. It's quite an interesting dynamic to give a class for just the acharyas. Okay, yes, this goes place. Oh, it's like funny to give a class for a room, but there was a computer here, so with pandemic, it gave us a sense of Zoom calls. But he was a saving grace. He came, did the vote, and I could talk to him. Yeah. I need this. What is it on? Oh, wait, wait. Wait, I don't really outside the buildings. You still listen to it? Yeah. Right on top of that. Oh. I didn't try. The other way you did it, I have a very would they like to because name for that? No, would they like out? That's funny. And you will do this. You're you're looking very good. Oh, that's the wow. How do you turn this on?
First, we just chant like with the BBs and then I'm gonna do the first chant.
Namaste. 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 Shiva Sati.